Joining me is former Hereford United player Mel Pejic. Mel, how does it feel to be back?
Very strange, actually. It's a few years now since I've been down to Hereford. Just had a walk around the city there, and it's a lot of changes. And obviously, looking at the stadium now, this hasn't changed much at all. So, yeah, really nice to be back.
You signed for Hereford originally in 1980 and stayed for 11 years. Did you envisage that you'd be here for that long?
Probably back then, I don't think anybody would envisage being at a club for that long length of time. But yeah, I thought my two boys were born down in Hereford. My wife came down after a couple of years, and we just loved the place. I think a lot of people have done that and stayed in the area, and probably will still do now.
Looking at your first couple of seasons, you suffered with injury problems. How hard was it for you to make an impact at the start?
It was really tough, really tough. I remember coming down and Frank Lord was managing, a couple of injuries and just things weren't working out, and he just basically said to me one day, your back's up against the wall, there's one way you go, you can either come out fighting or you pack it in, sort of thing. And luckily I sort of come out fighting, and then that sort of took me on then for having a good career at Hereford, and then obviously up to Wrexham afterwards. So
you made 535 league and cup appearances for Hereford. Any games that stick out in the memory?
I suppose the big ones are the big FA Cup games, against Arsenal particularly, where we felt we should have won the game, and probably emulated the old victory against Newcastle, but we just failed to do that on the day. That was a fantastic day, to be fair, not just for the players but for everybody involved in Hereford at that time. And a few years after that, games against Man United, again another FA Cup game, which I think clubs of the lower leagues thrive on really. And then obviously the Welsh Cup victory. So yeah, some really good memories.
What do you remember from that day at Cardiff Arms Park? Because you seemed to be quite injury ravaged that afternoon, and seemed to just be able to put a team together.
Yeah. I think back then we didn't have big squads anyhow, and we just managed to get a team together, and we just did well on the day. We sort of blended well on the day, and fortunate enough on the day we come out winners, which was great for us because at football you just want to achieve things, and it was good for the club at that time as we were a nice stable sort of lower league club at the time, and we actually won a Welsh Cup. Even though it was a Welsh Cup, it was a tournament.
Straight after the Welsh Cup final, Ian Bowyer released you. What was the reasons behind that?
I don't know. It was disappointing. It was at the back of, we had an open bus top tour around the city, and just jumping off the bus and that with my family, just got called in the office and Ian told me I was being released. So it was a massive dampener on that evening, and obviously on that season really.
Were there any plans to go to another team at that time?
Wrexham were interested in me at the time. Cardiff were one or two other clubs were sort of looking at me as well at the time. But then, to be fair, Colin Addison gave me a ring and asked me to come back. And obviously once Ian left, obviously Colin took over, obviously, then I come back after that then.
What was Colin like as manager?
Great. Man manager. He's historical, isn't he, within the club, and really, really nice guy, good manager. And he sort of tried to bring that sort of feeling back into the club again,
Colin left that following summer and John Sillick came in. How was your relationship like with John?
I think John wanted to probably change the sort of the whole structure of the team at that point, and I obviously I was trying to get to me coaching at the time as well, with the young boys or the scholars that we had at the time, and try to sort of develop my career forwards. But he brought Greg Downs in with him at the time as assistant manager, and Greg was obviously looking at doing that sort of role as well. So it wasn't probably a future for me here, unfortunately, at that time. So. And as I was then, I was probably into my early 30s. I needed to still continue playing football.
Is that why you went to Wrexham?
Yes, yeah, it was at the end. Obviously, I think my last game was here against Barnet, and 2-2 draw scored, and nice way to finish really. But obviously, Wrexham come in for me, made an offer, and the deal was done very quickly. So.
What was it like leaving Hereford? Because 412 league appearances, and you immersed yourself in the community as well. Looking at the programmes back then, you were in a lot of the local schools, and you were out and about the city, weren't you?
Yeah. Obviously, I think we all love the place. We got some close friends. We still sort of see friends and that down here. So yeah, well, it was really tough. It was really tough for me from a football point of view. You have to go and play football, and it was obviously Wrexham gave me that opportunity. For the family, it was a big wrench for them because they were integrated into the sort of lifestyle in Hereford. It was a big wrench when the boys were in tears when they left.
What was it like at Wrexham, because you won promotion, didn't you?
Yes, yeah. We within 2 seasons we won promotion. Again, that was a bit of a transitional period. Brian Flynn, Kev Reeves, and Joey Jones at the time up there, and we just got a good squad of players together. We blended, and we got promoted. I think the following season.
And you stayed at Wrexham and you retired to be the physiotherapist.
Yes, yeah. I finished playing when I was about 36. So in the end, look back and fairly reasonable career, hard but tough, and it was a challenge every season, but I managed to make a career out of it. And then fortunately, as I say, I was thinking about going into coaching, but then I dropped into the physio field, and that seemed to suit my nature, I think. And I think a few injuries I had at Hereford and Pete Isaac's rehabilitation sessions back in the day probably inspired me a little bit.
And it's Stoke City you're working at now?
Yes, Stoke City now, yes. Head of the academy, medical team.
And you're keeping up to date with all things Hereford FC?
More so this season, I think. I mean, obviously, I think I've had tough times around here, but it's good to see that, last sort of 5 years, things are going in the right direction. A bit of a blip at the moment this season. But again, I think it's just consolidation in the league that Hereford are in at the minute. And you just need to get a good bunch of lads together, get the right management in place, and then hopefully you get into the conference level.
Looking at the teams back in the 80s that you were with, the Hereford teams that you were with, there was a real big community spirit there, wasn't there?
Yeah, we had a lot, obviously local boys coming through, Stuart Phillipses and Ian Benbows and all that sort of stuff coming through into the system, and we had to be a community-based team because obviously Hereford is it's a city, but it's a little bit isolated where you look at other teams. But yeah, we just created a nice sort of atmosphere, and it's a lovely place to live, and I think a lot of people still live here that have moved into the area, like the ex-players like Tommy Hughes and Pete Spirey and all them sort of players are still in the area. So yeah, it's a lovely place.
And with that community spirit, are you still speaking to any former players? I know you're here with Keith Hicks this afternoon.
Yeah, I think football's strange at times. You do, because you get. I'm a busy guy anyway with the role I've got at the minute, so I do tend to keep in touch with one or two boys. But you tend to move on to other areas, and you do come across each other at certain times. But it is difficult, and time goes on as well, so you do lose touch with a few people, unfortunately. But it'd be nice to catch up with a few of the old boys today.